And yes, Anchor, we are ready. The music thing worked today. I've got the phone connected to the service where you can call in and make comments. I've got all the stuff in front of me that I need for this thing. And I have my co-host Angela right online with me right now. Angela, how are you?
I am doing well.
Good. So we were just chatting, and I got to tell. I want other people to know this. So you just recently got accepted to go to the peer support training in Idaho.
Yeah, the Idaho Peer Support Specialist Training, and I almost didn't make it in. I had my interview this last week, and they said it's just too full for this month. And so I wrote a strongly persuasive email, and the next day they said that I could come in. So yeah, so just did a tech thing for it today, and it should be interesting. So yeah, a little bit nervous. Because it's, I was, talking with John. I work from home anyway, but I'm used to, being able to set my own schedule and work in batches and, things like that. And this is going to be 8 hours straight every single day. And so, yeah, so we'll see how it goes. Yay.
Yeah. Well, so today's topic is going to be about women and alcoholism, and it's taken from an article that was written, published by Kaiser Health News. It's actually a pretty good article. I've read it, and there's also a little NPR audio that goes with it, and hopefully this will give us something to talk about. And I hope that those of you that are in the chat room will participate as well, because I don't really know until I get into these things. I never know what I'm going to what to say about something like this, other than I read it, interesting. There you go. But we'll probably have more to say than whatever. So I mean,
so you're going to try to play that.
Yeah. Why don't we start with that? So what we're going to do, well, maybe I should back up a little bit. I put out a lot of links here in the chat before you guys got into the room. And basically, I just did that as a way of making some announcements, because I do like to make announcements once in a while. So the first thing I'd like to point out is this. There's a link to the Secular Aaa Podcast site. It's at buzzsprout.com. And then just when you're at Buzzsprout, just type in Secular AA and you'll find the podcast. And that's where they're posting all of the audio from the various like speaker meetings and conferences and so forth. And the most recent episode that was posted was the talk given by Jeffrey Munn, author of Staying Sober Without God. And that was the one at the Euro conference that just happened a couple weeks ago or a week ago, whatever that is. Yeah. So there's a link to that there. This is interesting. I'm going to go to this Sunday, and you might find this interesting too, Angela, and maybe others out there might. This is a link to a flyer, and it's for a group called the Lopsided Triangle. Let me find that thing. Anyway, the Lopsided Triangle. And what they do is they're having like a series on anonymity in like social media. And so I think that this coming week, if I can pull up that link, they're going to talk about Twitter. And then the following week, they're going to talk about podcast and YouTube. And I'm going to be on that one. That's going to be the following week. Okay. I'm a little nervous about that one. Yeah. Because I don't, I'm not very anonymous anymore, but I think what I'll do is I'll talk about when I used to be anonymous and how I used to navigate it. Because I think they're interested in knowing, how do you do a podcast and how do you do a YouTube and all that stuff and remain anonymous? Well, it's actually pretty easy. And I can talk about how I used to do that. And then I'll say, but I don't do that anymore. I don't know. So anyway. Yeah. And I can explain why I don't do that anymore and see what they, see if I make anybody angry. We'll see. So there's that.
If so, they can write an inventory on it.
Yeah. They can. It'll test their serenity. Yeah. And I'm good at that. So, and then you can register for the International Conference of Secular AA. The easiest thing to do is just go to secularaa.org and click on the the first link that says learn more about the conference, and then it'll take you to two different places. The Ticket Leap site is where you can register for the conference itself. And you actually don't, Angela, need to create an account. And I put a link in there where you can bypass that. It's a little bit goofy the way you have to do it, but you can do it without creating a Ticket Leap account. But then you go in there and you register for the conference. And then there's another link on the Secular AA website for the hotel booking. And it takes you straight to the part of the hotel that gives you the discount. And you can go ahead and register for get your room and everything. So I'm happy. I'm all booked. I've got my plane ticket, got my room, paid for the conference, so I'm ready to go. Yeah.
Me too. Well, not the plane ticket, and but all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So, and then we'll see if they let you out of Missouri at that time.
If they let me out of Missouri, yes, they might not. That would be sad.
That would be sad.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else do we have here on announcements?
I think that's basically it for the announcements. So now
you had something with choosing therapy.
Oh, that's the name. Oh yeah, Choosing Therapy. This is a website that I don't know what they do. They talk about choosing therapy. They help people find resources to help them with different, addiction and mental health issues, I guess. Anyway, they came out with a list of the 15 best podcasts and or their best recovery podcast, and we made the list. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, we were number 15, and I think they do the very best last, and then work their way.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So.
But that was kind of cool. I always like to see that, and
cool.
and that list. If you go to that website, there actually is a nice list of podcasts that are listed on there. So. And I was amazed. Tracy remarked, and when I posted that on our Facebook group, that she's listened to most all of those podcasts, and like, wow, man, you're really quite the podcast connoisseur to have listened to all of those.
Yeah, she's a great resource for podcasts. So she listens to some great ones.
Okay, so that's it there. So, boy, look at all these comments already, and we've got 18 people in the room. Oh my goodness, that makes me nervous. Okay.
It'll be okay.
Okay. And then Joe has a comment here about the lopsided triangle. He's got the password there for it. And he says that he spoke with LT, mostly millennial members and others who got sober young, very progressive. Good to know, Joe. So maybe I won't piss them off. Maybe they'll piss me off. We'll find out. I don't know. I'm in a goofy mood. Okay, so we're going to talk about women and alcoholism. And this article was really interesting because for a long time, men were the ones that had most people that had problem with alcohol were men. They drank more than anybody, I guess. Now women are kind of meeting them, and in some categories, like in younger women, actually have a bigger problem than and drink more than men. So really kind of interesting. But maybe what we'll do, Angela, is I'll play this audio from NPR that talks about what we'll be discussing. And then maybe we can go through the article itself and kind of discuss that. And then hopefully people in the chat room can comment, ask questions, make comments, or even call us on our toll-free number and talk about this as well. So I don't know how good I'm going to do with this, but thank God I've got Angela here because she's smart. So, okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and play the audio. So all y'all have to do now is just kind of like what you're doing right now. Just kick back and listen. Here we go.
Alcohol consumption rose sharply in the U.S. during the pandemic. I'm sure none of us are surprised to hear that. Heavy drinking among women especially soared. It's a trend that was already happening for years before COVID-19. And the latest data shows that young women and teenage girls drink at higher rates than their male peers. Aaa Patani of Kaiser Health News has been covering the rise of alcohol use and abuse among women. She joins us now. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So just to start, what do we know about why people drink? I'm curious if we're seeing some differences between like why men drink and why women drink.
So it's hard to pinpoint for any specific individual why they drink, but research shows on a general level, men are more likely to drink for pleasure or for enjoyment. And women more often drink to cope with things like stress or anxiety. And that can be concerning because people who drink to cope, research shows, are more likely to develop an alcohol use disorder.
Well, I mean, this pandemic has been stressful and anxious for basically everybody, right? So does the increase of drinking to cope suggest to you that women suffer more from stress and anxiety than, say, men do?
Yeah, so certainly, increase in drinking during the pandemic has been reported, but this is something that predated the pandemic, right? Drinking to cope, a lot of researchers say, could be the reason why we're seeing this shrinking gap between men and women and the amount they drink, especially when it comes to teen and young adult women. Reports of anxiety, depression, eating disorder, suicide, all of those have been rising pretty quickly. And so a lot of researchers are saying, if we want to address the fact that women are drinking more, we might need to be looking at these underlying mental health issues.
Right. Well, just to speak on a strictly physical level, how does heavy alcohol use affect women versus men?
Women's bodies have less water than men's, even when you're talking about two people of the same weight. So that means with the same number of drinks, women reach higher levels of alcohol in their blood more quickly, and their body tissues are exposed to more alcohol per drink. The result of that is that they get sicker faster from alcohol.
Yeah.
And that means your shorter term things like blackouts, but also longer term effects like liver disease, cancer, or developing alcohol use disorder.
Well, now that we know that women are drinking about the same amount as men are, have resources for alcoholism, like treatment programs and such, adapted to that new reality?
Not quite. I mean, even as women are drinking more, they're not necessarily getting more treatment. A lot of people I spoke with said things like, that stereotypical image of someone who's affected by alcohol is still a man. So that means it's often harder to recognize problematic drinking in women. And even if it is recognized, treatment centers and recovery programs like 12-step are heavily male, right? A lot of men are participants, a lot of men lead those sessions, and that can be uncomfortable for some women, especially if they've experienced sexual violence or trauma. So there's starting to be some programs that are treatment programs that are women-centered, and there is some research that shows those are more effective, but it's early on.
That is Aaa Patani. She is a reporter at Kaiser Health News. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And that's it for that audio segment, but it kind of just gives you a little synopsis of kind of what they were touching on in the article. Angela, would you like to kind of begin the conversation here, maybe?
Sure. So you sent me the article earlier, and the link to the audio, and so I read over it, and I thought it was interesting. I had some things with it just because they're like research shows. And I'm like, you didn't cite that, but I was able to find citations for everything on there, and yeah. A lot of interesting points brought up. I think the one that stuck out the most for me was young women again, and that they don't really go into it as much here. But some of the stuff that I've seen in other articles, talk about the increase in social media and how much pressure that puts on women, particularly in regards to our looks. So for young women, it's very look-based of, having to look good all the time. And so that creates a lot of pressure. And so drinking to cope or to try to have fun and forget about that can be part of it. I think during the pandemic, some of the coping had to do with just, all the stuff that we generally do in life, and then having it all condensed into one place is more stressful. The other thing in the article that I found interesting was regarding the way that we our bodies process the alcohol differently, and I think that that's really important. I don't know that anybody has ever talked about that in a meeting that I've heard before. I've heard about, how long it takes, for it to leave your system in general, but it's always been a generalized thing, non-gendered. And so I think that's really important information. And some of the articles I looked over, because after this, I then went to PubMed, and so if anybody in there listening to this is really interesting, then definitely go to PubMed and type in, the search terms for women and alcoholism or women and alcohol use disorder, and there are some good stuff in the last few years. Particularly, they've been doing a lot of research on it, and there's one that was in Scientific American, and I believe it's titled "Women's Response to Alcohol Suggests Need for Gender-Specific Treatment Programs."
Yeah.
And so, part of that is has to do with trauma and lived experience, that women who have experienced trauma, violence on them by men, women who are pregnant, those women do, according to this document, seem to benefit more from all women treatment centers and recovery centers, because they are able to feel more open and are able to share, even if they tend to be introverted in general. So that's part of it. But the other part is actually, the way that alcohol moves through the system. And, I can't really describe it because I've only read it once, but there is a substantial difference in the way that it moves through the system, and it for women, according to this article, talks about the patterns of with our neurotransmission, and that it interrupts the serotonin production. And so because it does that, then we're more prone to depression. And so those are all, factors into that, as well as that article, and I believe the little audio mentioned, the water content of women, and that, with alcohol is absorbing that, or then it can affect our kidneys, because water is what we use to get rid of waste. It helps us get and maintain nutrients. It's essential. And so when alcohol affects that more in women than it does men, it makes sense that then we start to get sick faster with lower amounts than men do. And that makes sense to me on a personal level, because I just remember being so pissed off at my family because I was blacking out so quickly after I started drinking heavily. And, and I figured it was a genetic thing. But some of this research suggests that no, it's partially a gender thing as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. There was something in that article that I actually related to personally, but I thought it did a really good job of describing why it's so particularly dangerous to drink, to use alcohol to cope. Because I think one of the women in the article that was quoted, she said that she drank because to help her with her anxiety. But what she found is, as soon as she stopped drinking, the anxiety came on even worse. And it was just like, it just becomes a vicious cycle. And it just kind of shows how dangerous it can be if you're using alcohol to kind of numb that anxiety, because ultimately it may be for that short term, it helps, but you keep needing more and more.
Yeah, that was another thing about the article that was interesting, because they had that example, but then they also had the example of the woman that found that that as she was drinking, she started becoming suicidal, and when she stopped drinking, the suicidal thoughts went away. And I found that interesting, because I had more of the experience that once I stopped drinking, it seemed like there were more, but I could see how possibly somebody who may have disordered drinking, that would make sense, that once they stopped, that those suicidal thoughts would go away. And so I think it points at the spectrum of drinking as well, that, not everybody is, the full blown, as we would say in AA, alcoholic. Some people just, have disordered drinking and need to do some of the same things that we do to overcome that. But it's different for a lot of people. And so I liked that they included both of, those stories in there, to show that, it can be individual, and even within women, it can be an individual. But for me, the big thing in this was regarding the health outcomes and how alcohol affects that more quickly in women than in men. And a lot of it, I think, goes to trauma too. And it does talk in the article about, trauma, and that, women still are statistically more likely to experience a variety of childhood abuse and sexual abuse and all of that kind of stuff. And so, that does play a big factor in it as well.
Yeah. They also talked about, and you mentioned it too, how effective it is to have programs that are specifically designed for women. And in both the audio and in the article, they talked about how recovery literature now and recovery meetings in general are kind of male centric. They're written using men as the example, written by men for men. And then the meetings themselves are full of men, led by men, etc. So, and especially if you've already been traumatized, then that just compounds that problem.
Right. And I think that within AA and secular AA, there are, women's meetings, and that it's been my experience that there are women who attend those meetings that don't attend any other meetings, that they just feel more comfortable in those meetings. I don't know a lot about other recovery, modalities that, if they have them, that are gender specific. And so if that's available, and I think that would probably, lend to the difficulties for women to get sober or to get, help as well. That if they're not interested in the AA way of doing things, or they go to an AA meeting and they see, all of the things that you just listed, then, they may feel that it's not right for them and they may not get help. So looking into and creating more treatment options and women only, Buddhist recovery meetings and just, I think I did see one article that I didn't have a chance to read, but I'll give you the name of it. It's kind of long, so bear with me. But if anybody wants to look at it, it's a study that they did. Let's see, it is on PubMed, and it's mindfulness-based intervention effects on substance use and relapse among women in residential treatment, a randomized controlled trial with 8.5 month follow-up period from the Moment by Moment in Women Recovery Project. And I tried to look at the Moment by Moment Women Recovery Project, and I couldn't find a lot of information on it. It looks like it was some sort of a module type of a training and group-based thing, but it didn't look like it was a long-term type of process like, say, AA, or, what is it, Dharma recovery or something along those lines. It looked like it was a more of a training or a module type thing, perhaps within a treatment center setting. Residential treatment. So it looks like they're trying some different things, but it seems to be slow.
Yes. Some interesting comments in here. Joe said that he thinks that the Zoom and secular AA meetings have become a boon for women, not having to deal with 13th stepping and misogynistic behaviors upon entering AA. And he says it'll be interesting to see the future of AA. So what do you think about that? Do you think that's true?
I think that it depends on the meeting. I did see some of it and intervened in some, early in the pandemic. But my experience is that, there's a lot less of that to deal with. Women do have the choice, and men too, in a lot of meetings of not having their camera on. And so, most that, that's helpful for, not getting unwanted attention. It should be that it shouldn't matter, of course,
Right.
but, that's not always the case. And so I think that is helpful.
Yeah.
And so, so I don't know, when meetings start again. Again, some of them have, and so, but I haven't attended any, so I can't say what the atmosphere is like, post, major pandemic. So, I don't know.
And Jackie was making fun of the article you quoted.
She wasn't making fun of. She finds it riveting. She really does. She just wants somebody else to read it because it's long, and she's very busy and important.
The title was pretty long, that's for sure. But it does sound riveting. And then Laughing Dog says that in mixed meetings that I attended, the men would go out of their way to see how boorish they could be. Oh man, that's not very good. But I think, I don't know if they go out of their way, Laughing Dog. I think that for some guys it just comes natural, just to be like that. It's just the way they are. And then what else is going on here? Oh, Jackie says that working in a treatment center, I think that some of that is more marketing and less practice. As far as the I wonder what she's. Can you expand on that, Jackie?
Probably the effectiveness or their view of how effective that is. So that's one of the things that that I've been thinking about lately is with treatment centers in general is it's another thing that just needs to be overhauled and most likely more regulated because my experience with them in this area is that a lot of them are just basically like mills that if somebody's insurance or Medicaid will pay, then they bring them in and throw a bunch of information at them and try to keep them detoxed for 28 days and then throw them out. And so I think more studies showing, the long-term or additional recovery practices would probably be more helpful or, probably what we need. I do think there's a place for detox and stuff. I just, I guess I am more for the nonprofit than the profit biz side of it right now, at least from what I can see.
I agree with you. I think there is a bit of a problem with the profit incentive in treating drug addiction, alcoholism, because it's actually better. It's more profitable if you have these people keep coming in and out. And there's kind of this weird business right now. You have like these brokers that go out and find people who will match them up with treatment centers. It's just kind of a weird business. It would be nice, and maybe in other countries it is this way. It would be nice if it wasn't like a for-profit business and it was just like you're there to treat people, and it doesn't matter if you make money off of it.
One of the articles I read, and I think it might have been the women's response and the need for gender-specific treatment programs, that it was just sharing the information with women that there is a difference in how alcohol is processed in our body and how much it affects us differently was helpful in preventing relapse, that it improved their outcomes after learning that information. And so, I'm hoping to follow up on that too, to see if there's more information about that. Cause I think that's interesting. And I think, like I said, that would have been helpful for me
Yeah.
to know that, rather than just the general stuff that I got, which is that, yeah, it'll take a year or so for your, brain to detox from the effects of alcohol and stuff. And so I just kind of expected that. But to know the rest of it would have been helpful. And I don't know if that would have got me sober any quicker. But if that's right, and it's showing promise, then getting that information out there more rapidly and available to women, I think would be helpful. I did also see, they in one of the articles, they mentioned one of the problems too with getting women help was that a lot of them would just see their general practitioner rather than going to a specialist in the area, or reaching out to AA or addiction specific treatment centers and stuff. And that was a problem because a lot of general practitioners don't know that much about alcoholism or alcohol use disorder. They often don't get more than a couple of hours on it, if that. And so that's another stumbling block for women, because if they go and they share they have a glass or two after dinner, that kind of thing, which, most of us, if somebody was asking us if, we thought they had a problem with alcohol and they said that, we know that, we should probably add × to what they tell us.
Yeah, right.
But a doctor might not necessarily know that. So I thought that was another interesting perspective, because that wasn't, my thing. I've never shared with a practitioner prior to getting into recovery that I had a problem. And so having that information, I think, will be helpful for those who are trying to create programs for women.
Yeah, and Christina makes a good point too about having trauma-informed substance abuse centers that are affordable. And I don't know a lot about what's going on in the treatment industry or anything, but I know when I was taking my course to be a peer support specialist, that they talked a lot about being trauma-informed and how important that is. I think that I don't know how common that is to have that in the treatment industry now, but I think that would be important.
Yeah, I don't, at least in this area, I don't think it is. And, I think they're barely getting it through to some of the health and behavioral health places. So I think we still have a long way to go in that.
And Jackie points out, even if they do have it, if it's just for 28 days, that's really not enough.
Yeah,
you're gonna require a lot of follow up after that. It's just a beginning. That's another really good point there too. Something that I was thinking about as I was reading this too is how far we have to go as a society in changing this idea of what alcohol use disorder is, or alcoholism or drinking problem is, because it said in this article that there is still this image of the old wino with a paper bag, the guy, the man, older man, and it's weird that this is still the image after all these decades, and this is what, and I think this hurts young people, male and female. That was something that was in my mind as a young person, as a teenager, having problems with alcohol, thinking it can't be possible. You have it in this image, and I can see, women are reluctant to get help. They say that women now are drinking more than men, younger women, and they're less likely to get help for it. And because they have this image in their mind of what someone what an alcoholic is. It's almost like you have to get rid of all that terminology. I like this whole idea that alcohol itself is not good for you. and you can have problems with it that lie on a wide spectrum. It can go from just being somewhat troublesome, something that you might be able to manage at this point in your life, to being completely out of control, to where you've got to stop or you're going to die, and then everywhere in between. And it's like, it's just like wherever you are on that spectrum, just recognize that it's alcohol itself that's the problem. It's not has anything to do with, there's a lot of other things that complicate it, of course, but I don't know if I'm making any sense, but just to get away from that whole idea that you have to be laying under the bridge,
Right. Yeah. Labels is, and wording, phrasing, all of that is important for, making a change with this, I think. But I think I'm really in the Gabor Mate crowd of, the root cause. So, I wouldn't say that alcohol is the problem. It's a problem in health outcomes, which is what this article is about, that it affects us physically, and that gets worse, and it seems to get worse in women at a faster rate. But for me, the root of why I needed it to cope was not, because I liked it.
Right.
The truth for me is that I never liked the taste of alcohol.
Right.
And I do know quite a few people that, still do, they've been sober a long time and they're like, but I loved it. That wasn't my experience. But with, the Gabor Mate, influence, I guess, is that the root, I think for most people is in trauma. And so part of the criticism against him, and part of, what a direction I think we were going a minute ago was, changing the way that people think about alcoholism and alcohol use disorder and such, is that idea. And that's something that we within, the recovery loop can't agree on either. Like I got together with a couple of women that I know a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about the disease model. And so there's a lot of people that are very much into the disease model of alcoholism, and I can see why it's useful, because it helps with feelings of guilt or shame, possibly. If you can say that, I have this disease, then it's not my fault. And Gabor Mate's, not in that camp as a physician, even that he's in that, not enough time has developed since we developed understanding of things like alcohol use disorder, and he specifies ADHD, depression, those kinds of things, for these to be genetically responsible. That it's a societal thing, and that the societal thing can cause changes within our bodies and the way that we process things. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. And so I tend to be more of the camp of, I don't just want to treat people for, alcohol use disorder or depression, and, so that they don't commit suicide. I want to create a world where they don't want to escape, where I don't want to escape, and that, the disease model isn't, helpful in my mindset for that sort of vision. But it is helpful for people needing to get into a treatment center to detox. And for quite a few people, that's what they need. And so that's why I understand it, but
it's over my head, honestly. But I can see where I'm like you in a lot of respects. I could also see where it could be helpful for someone to just have some framework to understand what the hell's going on with them, because it can be really confusing when you're like, when you're in this trap of addiction. And if you stop saying, okay, so I'm going to treat it like it's this, it just kind of gives you some framework to work on. But it is certainly very, very complex. But, me looking back on it, I certainly started drinking, not consciously, but I drank alcohol because it was medicine for me. It changed the way I felt, and I didn't understand what was going on with me. I didn't understand what it was that I wanted to change, but it gets you in that. It gets you caught in that trap. Christina says, there's one place I heard of in Arizona that is a long-term treatment center with somatic therapy experts. But the person I know who went there had well-off family who were able to afford it.
Mm.
Didn't you talk
Yeah.
about the somatic? Didn't you talk about that one night?
Yeah, somatic experiencing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a great form of therapy,
Uh-huh.
particularly for trauma, and both acute trauma. So, say you were in a car accident recently, that will be, an excellent treatment for that, because it helps you work it through the body so that you don't retain the trauma for long. So, this kind of goes into, the whole discussion, where I think that part of our big problem is our mind body, division that we have in our society, where, we think things are either mental or they're physical, and we don't, regard that they have an effect on both, because it's all one system, and so yeah, so with, somatic therapy, it's good for that in particular, and also for long-term trauma that people have had, particularly veterans, combat veterans, so PTSD, or other type of physical trauma, sexual traumas, it can be helpful for, because it helps the mind connect to the place in the body where that's still being stored. And so, so a good book that kind of goes over that is the, Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. And it talks about trauma and the physical manifestations of it. It doesn't go a lot into somatic experiencing. Dr. Peter Levine is the person who kind of developed somatic experiencing. So if people want to know more about that, that's who I would look up. And there's tons of stuff on the internet regarding him, and lots of podcasts and stuff where he talks about it.
Post a link to Sober Powered, which is a podcast that was mentioned in that article. I haven't listened to it yet, but she also has a YouTube channel. I'm gonna check it out. But here's a link to a podcast mentioned in the article.
Okay.
There you go, Sober Powered. Boy, you got some more comments in here. Yeah, I missed that comment that about Recovery Dharma, Paula, but apparently Joe said that Recovery Dharma is a safe place for women, and Paula agrees with that she's attended some of the local Recovery Dharma meetings. And then something, okay, David is there. For me, it was extremely important to know that I was a sick person trying to get well, talking about the whole disease model. So there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of comments today. Anyway, I might have to curate some of these. Bessel van der Kolk is a senior fellow at Peter Levine in that facility in Arizona too. It sounds amazing. Christina, you know your stuff, don't you? Christina is pretty smart. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, sorry, I probably interrupted you, Angela.
That's okay. I forgot where we were
what train
with
you're
that.
on.
And so I'm wondering if she's talking about the Meadows. I think it's called in Arizona. But yeah, the majority of us can't afford the kind of treatment that would be the most helpful for us. So I've mentioned before that
she says the Meadows.
Yeah, that my spirit animal is Alanis Morissette, and that she hasn't put out one of the Conversations with Alanis podcasts that she used to do in a while, but they're still available. And in them, she talks to, some of the experts that have helped her throughout her, recovery from various things. And so I would, suggest that as a resource for people as well. And so I don't think she's talked to Bessel van der Kolk, but she's talked to Dr. Peter Levine, and she's talked to Dr. Richard Swartz, who, is the originator of the internal family systems and self-directed leadership, which is great. And Dan Siegel, who does some great work on what he calls, interpersonal neurobiology. And that's, all about, kind of trying to reconnect the mind-body experience so that you are more intuitive of what's going on within your own physical, emotional, and mental system, so that you can, improve your health outcomes, etc.
Well, if anybody has any comments, they want to call in, you can do so at 844-899-8278, and we'll take your call. Be glad to hear from you. And if you want to talk about something other than this, you can do that as well. I'm kind of coming to a place where my mind is drawing a blank. What else I can say about the article I read, other than I did find it very interesting, and I especially found it interesting how this seems to really be an issue with younger women, teenage girls, and younger women. And it does make sense, like what you were talking about, with the pressure that they feel with social media and all of that. So I also kind of was wondering, as I was reading this, if they were talking about the dangers of drinking to cope, and I wonder, like, I think I was drinking to cope, but I don't think I was consciously aware of it. And I wonder if the people that they're writing about are like that too. If they're not, I wonder if they're consciously aware that I'm drinking to cope, or it just happens.
Well, I think that it's probably the mindset is they're not aware that that's what they're doing, or they're using it. They don't think of it in terms as those of us who've been in recovery for a while are like, oh, that's a coping mechanism. Or,
right.
If you've had, extensive therapy, then you know that, and so, so they probably wouldn't think of it as in that way. It's more normalized. And so, right. The image, like I said, of having a glass of wine after a long day at work, or,
this is going to calm me down.
For younger women, going out to the bar with friends, and stuff to have a drink, late in the evening. Those are all things that they may be doing it to cope, but that's what their social group is doing as well. And so they don't think of it as they're doing it to cope, that's a normal thing to do. So it's very normalized.
Okay. Now, Paula makes a really good point here as well, that a lot of horrible things happen to us alcoholic women when we are drinking. If we don't have PTSD from childhood issues, we are likely to get that from our drinking experiences.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
And quite a few of us both. So.
Yeah. If you haven't read this book, and I've talked about this book, I don't read as much as a lot of people, but there's one book I read that really made an impression on me and taught me a lot about a woman's perspective of alcoholism, is Catherine Gray's book, The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober. And she talks about just what Paula mentioned, that she and her girlfriends would just kind of look out for each other if one of them got like really drunk, because it was so dangerous. Anyway, it was just really interesting for me as a man to read that book that she wrote. And she just writes so well, but I can't say enough good things about that book and what I learned from it personally, and how helpful I think it could be to women. But a lot of what I talk about now, when it comes to what I'm kind of formulating as my concept of recovery, comes from what I learned from that book, basically, and what she has to say, and the way that she handles her recovery today, which I find interesting and different from anything that I would have experienced when I was starting out. So, but check that book out if you haven't read it, anybody. Catherine Gray's Unexpected Joy of Being Sober. It's really a good book. But I like what Paula had to say there. I think that would be very, very true.
Right. Yeah. Another person, that I still haven't read the book, but I have it, in my audiobooks waiting to be read. Untamed. She has a podcast now, and so I've been receiving links from various friends on certain episodes for her podcast. So that might be a good resource for women who are looking to find other women who are in recovery, who they would like to get some experience, strength, and hope from, and see what different avenues, different ways of recovering there are out there. And who else has, there's another, actually that list that you are on of the 15, there were several of them that were part of that as well. I've never listened to the drunk mom, I think it was called. I'm thinking of that one because I think Anchor brought it up. Could mom be an accurate representation of women in recovery? I wasn't a mom, and so I don't know.
Let's talk about the TV show. Did you ever watch?
Oh,
the TV
that
show?
mom. Okay, got it. I'm like, no, they're not all moms. Okay. Took a minute. I haven't watched that show, so
I love that show. I love
I've heard, most people say that they love that show, but
I do. I think it's hilarious. And I'm not really a TV watcher, but that's one show I watched a lot on wherever I saw it, and I'd like for like one episode after another. It's just hilarious. I don't know how accurate it is or not. Anchor, obviously, what do I know? I'm a guy, but I know it's really funny. It's a funny show, and it does a good job, I think, of kind of showing what 12-step culture is like, and how you go out after a meeting, and kind of the funny things that happen in meetings and so forth. So I think in that sense it does a pretty good job of depicting recovery culture anyway. But I don't know about the women part. Not being one myself, I wouldn't know. But yes, and Bree says chapter 8 of the big book has driven as many women in AA as out of AA as 13 stepping.
Yeah. I really hope that they decide to start changing some of that, some of the literature. I think this article, mentions that.
It does. And the woman that says that she wants to change some of that when she finishes her master's program.
Right, because it is a big deal. I mean, for me, one of the key things in recovery, and this whole thing with peer support is looking for other people who are like me, who have similar experiences, or have felt some of the same things, to be able to get hope from. And so, if you're reading along and it's all in gendered terms that you can't relate to, it doesn't leave you with a lot of hope. And so, so more literature, changing the literature. I'm not saying, to burn all the whole literature, but look at it as a historical document. That's, how I feel about the big book, is it's a historical document. There's some interesting stuff in there, and, but I look at other books like Steppenwolf as a historical document, not as a how-to on, on how to be a depressive. So I just wish that more people would be willing to let it go as that, and then we can create additional resources for people who really need them, and hopefully create the society that we want to live in, where that's what we want to do is live, and not try to escape all the time.
Yeah. Paul talks about when she first got into AA, it was customary for men to hug the women after the meeting, a room full of predatory men. I'm not a hugger myself, and so I don't do that. But I do see how that could be really make people feel uncomfortable. And then fortunately that isn't done anymore. At least I haven't seen it in a long time. I don't really see a lot of that either. At least in the meetings
I think it'll be even less now. But there was some hugging at meetings beforehand. I think that within the secular community, at least, the meetings I attended, it seemed like more of the men were aware, a little more aware of, gender, the changes in society, of that they can't
respect
just go
someone's
around,
space.
hugging
Yeah.
anybody they want to, even if they mean well.
Yeah.
But in other AA meetings that I attended, it was still very much, somebody would come up and just say, I'm a
Right.
hugger,
Oh, yeah,
and,
right.
that kind of a thing.
And you know what? I
And
should say,
so,
yeah, I'm not. Go away.
right, right.
Because I'm not really.
Yeah,
And there's nothing wrong with that. Anyway,
yeah,
I
yeah.
get Mom. Other than the peer support, it seems like there was always way more reasons for women to leave AA than there to stay.
Mm. Well, I think that it's the peer support is the reason to stay, and that not a lot of other resources. Like we
Yeah.
said, if you don't know of that many women who have been able to get and maintain sobriety, then it just leaves you hopeless. And so, a lot of us stayed within AA because it was the only gig in town, and then the people that were really had the women I know who really had significant trauma went to women's meetings and instead of going to mixed meetings, and so they were still able to find a place within the structure to be able to get and maintain sobriety. But I am really glad that there's a lot more happening now, different understandings of alcohol use disorder or disordered, use of alcohol or substances these days, so that there's additional resources.
Yeah. Well, to conclude things, Angela, let's talk a little bit about the last couple minutes that we have about the conference in Bethesda that'll be coming up in October. And so you're going to be there, I'm going to be there, so we should definitely get a room or something and do a podcast, do a live podcast there.
Well, it'll be there Friday night,
Mhm.
so that's part of one of the nights of the conference. So
Okay.
so I'd say just let's contact Greg and
Get that set
reserve
up.
one of the rooms for it'll be later at night if we decide to do it, the same as if we any other Friday.
I didn't even look at their schedule. What are they?
Yeah.
What's the schedule?
I don't know. Do they have the
I
schedule
don't
out
know.
yet? I think they're still looking for things. So that's
Okay.
another great thing to talk about right now, is that, as Joe said, this is a very popular topic. So if there's some ladies that would like to get together and do some sort of a panel, that I think that they're open for that. They're still looking for people who want to do panel discussions or lead workshops and all of that kind of stuff. So if you have some ideas, then I say, go for it.
That's when people are making fun of me for not liking to hug.
Now everybody's going to try to hug you.
I know.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny. So I'm looking forward to all that, and I do think that they do need people that are interested in doing workshops and panels and so forth to do that, and
to have a variety of them, because there's going to be people who are doing a workshop, like atheists in AA, and and they may have a different view on what that means than you do as another atheist in AA, and in 2018 there were several of them that had the very similar themes. But they were led by different people, and so they had different perspectives, and I think that that's really important, and I think it'll be what'll probably make this conference that much better, is if we have more of that. I think that'll bring people together more and feel more inclusive. So.
I agree, and it is really interesting to me that there is such a variety of experience and ways of describing an experience of someone who's secular in AA and what that exactly means. And there's just there's a lot of different ideas and experiences out there, and how people prefer to express their recovery as a secular person. And I think that's great. And then there will always be the voice of the few loud people who say that their way has got to be the way, that someone else's way is a stupid way or something like that. That will happen too,
Right.
unfortunately. But,
Yeah. They're not solely reserved to the traditional AA community.
Yeah.
So
yeah, this hour did go by fast. Thank you, Angela, for making this possible. I would have been able to discuss this and spend an hour discussing this article. So thank you so much, and thank you everybody who have been listening and commenting in the YouTube chat and the Facebook chat. That's always helpful as well. Thank you, Jackie, for the nice compliment. Always nice to hear some feedback from people if they enjoy this or not. If they don't enjoy it, they give us a thumbs down. There's always one or two thumbs downs, and that's okay too. But it's nice to get some feedback to say, oh, wow, you actually got something out of that, because sometimes I wonder, did you really? Is this really good? But you guys hung in there. There's still 22 people out there. So anyway, I'm blabbing. I am so glad it's the weekend, and I hope that you guys have a nice one. And thank you all for listening. And I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye with a little bit of music. And that's it. That's another episode, another live stream. We'll be back again next Friday. I have, by the way, been posting episodes, and I've got more to post. I'll try to do one this weekend. So look out for those if you subscribe to the podcast. Anyway, y'all take care. We'll be back again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.